If you saw my video where I migrated my gaming PC into a rack mount case, then this is a very similar video for my streaming PC. My existing case is a Fantex Evolve Mini ITX, and as you can expect, it's got an ITX motherboard. The MSI MPG Z390i Gaming Edge AC, and being an ITX motherboard, it has very limited upgrade options. It does have a spare M2 slot on the back side of the motherboard. And I've seen a few videos on YouTube that show there are many other M2 devices out there which are just not storage related, as technically an M2 slot is just a PCI Express port. So I did a bit of internet searching and finally found this on AliExpress. It's an ADT Link M2 NVMe to PCIe 4.0 x16 extender Gen 4/3 riser adapter. The one I bought is 60 centimeters in length. With shipping, this ended up costing me 30 Australian dollars. I've had it for a while, waiting for an opportunity to try it out. Being on the underside of the motherboard, if it worked, then I wouldn't be able to use it until I replaced the case. Well, seeing as I'm about to move the PC into a rack case, now is the time to test it. As if it does work, I'll need to install it before installing the motherboard in the case. I have a spare 10 gigabit dual port SFP Plus NIC from when I used to have an ESXi server. This will allow me to connect to my Dell X4012 10 gigabit SFP Plus Ethernet switch, and thus allowing more bandwidth between the gaming PC and the streaming PC. From a technical standpoint, the M2 slot on the motherboard is a PCI Express 3 slot that supports X4 mode. Digging through some Intel documentation, this card is PCI Express version 3 X8, which is 7.8 gigabits per second. The beauty of PCI Express is that it is backwards compatible. A newer card will be forced to operate at the speed of the older slot along with the amount of lanes available. So with the slot being limited to X4 mode, the card will run at a maximum of 3.9 gigabits per second. I'm curious though, being a 2-port card, does that mean each port only uses 1.95 gigabits per second, and by only using one port, I will still get max speeds? I don't think I'll ever have a definitive answer on that, but it will be an improvement over what I had, if it works. I was skeptical as to whether this adapter would work, but with the port installed, the PC booted fine. After shutting down the PC, I installed the 10 gigabit card into the adapter. It booted up fine and appeared in Device Manager. After installing the Intel network drivers, everything seemed okay, so I connected the SFP Plus cable between the network card and the switch, and bingo bango, everything's working as it should. How about the transfer speeds? How do they compare to what I get on my gaming PC? So, my copy test from my NAS is achieving about 550 to 650 megabytes per second. This isn't as good as the 650 to 730 I was getting on the gaming PC, but it's way better than what I would be getting with the 1 gigabit NIC I was using in the streaming PC. So with that test out of the way, I'm going to remove the adapter and put it aside until I move the motherboard into the rack case. The next step was to take the computer outside and give it a good dusting. It's been quite a while since this has been done. I take the PNY GeForce RTX 4060 Ti 8GB GPU out. It's only been installed for 9 months and it's very clean, so I put it in its bag and take it inside. Next up is the CPU cooler and its fans. This is a Cooler Master Liquid ML240L RGB AIO cooler. When running a Cinebench 2024 test, CPU temps max out to 87 degrees Celsius. The one caveat is that I have one of the 120mm fans removed, so the RTX 4060 fits in the case. So I'm not going to be comparing apples to apples when it's mounted in the rack case. The CPU it's cooling is an Intel Core i9 990K. After this, I took the PC back inside and continued removing the components, but I didn't film this part as I had a brain fart and forgot to. Alright, so here's the rack case I'm going to be mounting everything into. It's an Antec 4U22ATX, which is 4 rack units in height. I've had this case since 2010 and it's had a couple of ESX server upgrades in it. I'm going to mount the AIO radiator off this middle bracket. It'll fit nicely in and allow good airflow. First up, I'm going to mount the power supply. It's a Cooler Master MWE Gold fully modular 650 watt V2 power supply. I want it in place so I know where the power cables will be located to help with the radiator mounting. My main drive is a Samsung 860 QVO 1TB SATA SSD, so I'm going to mount it here in the middle of the case. Being a 2.5 inch drive, I'm using a 3.5 inch mounting plate to allow me to mount it in the frame. I do actually have an NVMe SSD on the motherboard, but it's only 500 GB in size and it used to have a Linux installation on it. So when I turned this PC into a streaming PC, I bought this 1TB SSD. In the near future, when I upgrade my PCs to Windows 11, I'm going to replace the NVMe in the gaming PC and then move that SSD over to this PC. But for the time being, what I've got is fine. Next up, I put the motherboard I/O shield backplate in place, ready for the motherboard installation. The motherboard standoffs are already installed in the case, so installing the motherboard is a no-brainer. It's at this point that I install the M2 NVMe to PCIe extender on the back side of the motherboard. Due to the direction of the cable coming off it and not wanting to fold it, I'm going to route it back up past the I/O shield. Just as well, I bought a 60cm length version. I've left the AIO radiator mounted to the CPU as I want to compare the temperatures once it's in the rack case, and if I was to reapply thermal compound, then I wouldn't be comparing apples to apples. Even though I will be re-adding the second fan to the radiator that has been absent due to the GPU size. Before mounting the radiator, I connect up the power supply cables to the motherboard and then put the crossmember back in place and check the spacing of things. I'm going to use these 90-degree brackets to suspend the radiator from the crossmember. The spacing seems right and I won't need to drill any holes. These are left over from another project in the past, so sometimes being a hoarder and keeping things is useful. A couple of nuts, bolts and washers later, and it's held in place nice and sturdy. I wasn't expecting it to be this easy. Next up are the rear fans. Installing these Noctua NF R8 Redux 80mm 1800 RPM PWM fans. These fans are great because they have an imprint on them showing the direction of the airflow. They are mounted into plastic brackets that came with the case, and considering the case is over 15 years old, I'm surprised the plastic brackets haven't broken. So let's never talk about that again. Anyways, these are connected to the motherboard fan header with the PWM splitter cable. This network cable I'm running in the side here is actually a custom cable to connect to the header pins on the motherboard for the power switch, power LED and hard disk drive LED. This is going to be covered in a future video as it's part of a bigger project I'm working on. Time to install the GPU. With this crossmember in place, it's a bit too tight, so lifting it up lets it slide in neatly. There are these adjustable arms on the crossmember for holding down expansion cards. 3 of them sit snugly on the GPU, so that works out nicely. After a little bit of cable organising, it's time to install the 10 gigabit network card into the M2 NVMe to PCIe extender. The back of the extender has a foam pad on it to prevent any electrical shorts, and with it screwed into the rear expansion slot, it's not going anywhere. This extender also has a power connector which connects to the same cable that the SSD hard drive is connected to. Before forgetting, I need to connect that custom header pin cable to the pins on the motherboard, otherwise I won't be able to power it on. While in that same area, I have an RGB 3-way splitter cable I need to connect to the motherboard header. Even though I won't be able to see the RGB lights, I'll still know that they aren't working. The AIO cooler CPU block has an RGB cable, so I'll connect that to the RGB splitter cable, and then the radiator fans also have RGB cables. I haven't actually mounted the radiator fans just yet because, unlike the Noctua fans, they don't have an imprint on the frame that indicates the direction of the airflow. So I'm going to power on the computer temporarily to determine that direction. Now, I totally didn't let the fan fall over and hit the metal case. That was just your imagination. A close inspection reveals no damage, so it's on to permanently mounting them to the AIO using the extra long screws that came with the AIO. They have a textured end that allows you to tighten them by hand easily. Powering the case on one more time and everything seems okay. The airflow direction is correctly pulling the air from the front and pushing it out the back of the case. I put the lid on the case and moved it back to the rack, connected it up, and everything is working as it should be. So, was it worth it? Well, the migration to a rack case certainly improved the airflow. When running a Cinebench 2024 test, CPU temps maxed out to 78 degrees Celsius. That's down 9 degrees from before. However, previously I only had one of the two 120mm fans on the radiator due to the GPU length. So it's not entirely an apples to apples comparison. On the GPU side, previously a 7-minute Fermark benchmark resulted in a temperature of 80.8 degrees Celsius. Now, when running a 15-minute benchmark, it peaked out at 76.1 degrees Celsius, a difference of 4.7 degrees. The extra case space also allowed me to upgrade to the 10 gigabit networking, and this is also very beneficial, allowing more bandwidth between the gaming PC and streaming PC. It was also very cool being able to use the spare M2 slot on the motherboard with an adapter to connect a PCI Express card to an RTX motherboard. RTX motherboards are not known for their expandability. That brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed learning more about how my computer setup runs behind the scenes. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop a comment below and I'll be sure to respond. Stay tuned for a video where I build a recording PC to turn my 2 PC setup into a 3 PC setup. Until next time, bye!